like dance music is very kind of grimy and less mixed, less mastered. People don't really want refined content anymore. Raw content from your phone almost always does better than content from a camera now on social media, which is insane. And I think that's just because people want to experience something that's more familiar or more similar to what they experience in real life.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Music Ally Focus with me, Music Ally's editor, Joe Sparrow. And in this episode, we're joined by Andre Benz, who's founder and CEO of The Nations. What is The Nations? Well, it's a series of independent music curation networks on YouTube, and The Nations is actually the largest of them, with 50 million or over 50 million subscribers and 20 billion views plus across its catalog. It's also the 122nd largest YouTube channel in the world. So what is it? Well, The Nations incorporates a few different components, The Nations channels, and also something called Lowly and something called Broke. So I wanted to speak to Andre about exactly what it is like to build a multifaceted modern ecosystem on YouTube, and how that supplies the needs of modern music fans and creators, and also how you do it on top of existing infrastructure like YouTube, and how all these other components of what he has built all connects together. Let's go over to Andre right now. All right, I'm very happy to welcome Andre Benz, founder and CEO of The Nations, to the podcast. Hi, Andre.
Hi, Joe. How's it going?
Yeah, great, thanks. Good to see you. Now, I'm very interested in what you're doing with, well, I'm saying The Nations, but there's a whole cluster of businesses there, isn't there? So could you just kick us off by explaining who you are, what you do, and what is Nations, also Lowly and Broke in a nutshell, that ecosystem, please?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I started the company back when I was 15, so I'm 27 now, so it's been about 12 years of kind of working in this. And originally when I started The Nations, it was originally just a YouTube channel. And the whole premise of it was, when I was in school and I played video games, back then Spotify wasn't really that relevant, or it was just kind of starting to grow. And a lot of people discovered music on YouTube and SoundCloud, at least in my age group. So when I would listen or play video games, I wanted to listen to music, and I would basically just create a personal playlist on YouTube, and I would do it by uploading these videos. And I thought it would be cool to add a logo to it, and basically just like have this public playlist that I could share to my friends and people that I played video games with. And then one video basically just took off, which was a remix of Miley Cyrus' Wrecking Ball, which is like an EDM remix of it. And then I realized there is this massive audience of people who wanted these dance remixes, whether they be bootlegs or officials. And I basically just took that and ran with it. So I kept uploading them to YouTube. The channel blew up, I think, when I was 18, and it had 2 million subscribers or more. Moved to Los Angeles, started the company, and then off the back and premise of that, we decided after, basically putting on all these artists and they blow up and have millions of views after a few days, we noticed that there are a lot of major labels and other labels, scouts, A&R scouts, coming in and just signing all these acts and then claiming our videos. So we said, okay, well, we're not really making any money on a lot of these remixes. It's not really fair. Let's get into, the label game. So we started a publishing company and a record label and really tried to create more artist services out of that. And the whole premise of the company now is we're this large kind of like media conglomerate, where we own all of our own marketing channels, but also have a record label where we can tie that into. So we're very cost effective in terms of how we operate and market music that we sign and work.
Let's start with The Nations sort of suite of platforms. Can you sort of unpack that a bit in terms of how it started? And you mentioned there you were uploading videos to share, but how did that start, and how did that then sort of become a sort of experience that fans connected to? What does it give them?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk a bit more about how that works.
Yeah, of course. So like I said prior, it was kind of just started as like a hobby. And I was doing it a while without really anybody paying attention to it for about a year and a half, 2 years almost. There's like the channel wasn't doing well at all. Nobody was really paying attention. And then actually the reason why it blew up, why the remixes blew up was because back then Vine was really big, and all these remixes would go viral on Vine, which is essentially today's modern day TikTok, or back then it was TikTok. And then nobody had a source to listen to them as like a landing page. So I would basically just find these bootlegs and upload them to these bootleg remixes that went viral on Vine, I'd upload them to YouTube. So that was kind of like the early days, and then over time, as I developed the YouTube channel, I kind of took a more thoughtful approach to like, okay, like why are people going to the channel? What are they listening to? Who are these people? When are they listening to it? And why are they listening to it? And I basically found that a lot of the people that are listening to it are basically kids like myself when I was developing the channel who are listening to it either before or after school or in their daily routines. So I noticed like huge increases in streams Monday through Friday and then massive drop offs on the weekend because people would just listen to them in their daily routines. And obviously, the dance remixes is what people really wanted. So I just lead into that, and then obviously, YouTube is a video format, platform. So most people, I think, didn't assume music would be so big on that platform, and I always leaned into the fact that it was very visual, not just audio as well. So instead of like static wallpapers or just photos, I created basically this audio visual effect where it would move with music, which has been, I guess, pretty iconic for the channel. Like even today, if you go on TikTok or YouTube, you'll see a bunch of audio channels like myself use the same visualizer that I created back in like 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty iconic with the brand. And then ever since I started that, the engagement just went through the roof because I think people realized like, oh wow, this is a really interactive kind of cool experience for listening to music.
Right.
Um,
What is it they exactly want? You've sort of said there it's like it's part of their routine.
mhm.
Is it sort of analogous to, in the old days people would wake up in the morning and flip on the radio to a certain channel and they trusted the mix of music and the way it was delivered to them? Is it sort of a modern version of that? But there's
Yeah,
also this community element as well.
yeah. It's essentially it's kind of a mix of the two. So the way I explain it to, I guess, like maybe older people in the music industry is it's a modern day radio station for Gen Z and young kids who want to listen to music that fits their needs or fits what they want to listen to. Obviously now it's probably changed a little bit over the years. When I was younger and developing it, that's exactly what it was. But I think people trusted me as a curator, and I was very interactive with the community. So it's like a lot of people. I remember I would reply to every single comment for as long as I possibly could until there was too many comments to reply to.
Right.
And the goal of it was like when I was on YouTube and a kid, like I've been on the internet since I was 9, 8, 7. I've been on YouTube forever since before Fred hit 1 million subscribers. I remember when Fred hit 1 million subscribers, and that was like massive for YouTube as a platform, just to show you
Yeah.
how early that website really was. I was on it or that early on. I remember when I was fans of these larger influencers, if they just replied to my comment, it would make my entire week, if not month, right? And it's like I always thought there's so much power to behold in the fact that you as an individual person or entity can make somebody feel something like that just by
Right.
replying back to the comment, making them feel special or important. So that was something that I kind of like put into the channel as well, where it's like, yeah, this is a brand. It's not really about me, but it's more or less about the community of people that listen and like this kind of music, and
Mm.
making them feel like they can come back to the channel, communicate, build a relationship or a community with other people that like the same music, and also connect with the brand and the founder who's creating the brand through the comments, which I was very active in. And I think that was kind of like the special sauce of the channel. It's like these unique visuals. It's music that you can trust and listen to on your daily, commute to work or whatever, going to school or whatever it may be. And it's also being able to communicate and kind of like build into this community with the founder who's also kind of like heading it up. And I think that's like a unique opportunity, especially back then, that just didn't really exist on any single music format.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, what you've described, which is essentially it's a community where the people who are part of the community feel valued and they enjoy their interaction, right? And
Mhm.
if you talk to artists, DIY artists, big artists, this is what they're trying to build at the moment. This place for fans to enjoy that fandom and make it part of their routine. Um, so that's what they get out of it. They trust you. They trust your company's taste making, if you like, because for context, of course, the Nation network. There's a bunch of different ones. There's Trap Nation, Bass Nation.
Correct. Yeah.
They're all supplying different forms of music, like channels. Um, so you've got this community of people who trust it and they like what they get from it. So what opportunity does that give to artists?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as I continued to build the channel and we got more recognition, it became basically almost like a guaranteed spot to get millions and millions of impressions and views. And it was essentially free for everybody involved, right? So I would never charge artists for uploading videos.
Yeah.
And then the fans, obviously, it's free. They go to the video and they watch ads, and that's how the income on the monetization side is generated. And then we'd split that revenue with the artist, depending on either the size of the artist or the licensing agreement we have in place, or
Mm.
what label they're associated with, independent or a larger label. And that was basically kind of like the value proposition. And then as the channel grew, it became a point where a video would get 1 million views in 2 days, and that would translate to Spotify. That would
Mm.
translate to Apple Music, and we started creating playlists on those areas where I remember when we first started the Trap Nation playlist, we were one of the largest independent playlists on Spotify, period. And at the top spot in the Spotify playlist is getting 40,000 daily streams. So when we started a label and really started putting on artists harder, and more kind of like dedicated in that format, we were just breaking songs left and right in kind of like the internet scene. Obviously, it's not as powerful anymore because it's very saturated in terms of the brands that were created in the last like 6-7 years in that ecosystem. But when we first started it, it was insane. Yeah, I mean, every single artist in the dance scene was trying to get on that channel because they knew they could just break the song within a week.
Yeah.
Essentially.
So, what's your relationship with artists now? How does it work in the same sort of way? And what is when they work with you and say, "Hey, here's my new video," are you looking for sort of exclusivity, or how does that work? And what are they telling you that they're getting out of it?
Yeah, I mean now we're the channel. I wouldn't say is as impactful as it used to be, just because everything has a life cycle.
Mm.
Brands, everything has a life cycle. So I think back then we were a lot more powerful. Now we're a little bit more chill. We focus more on the record label side. More on the other kind of businesses we're starting as well. Although Trap Nation is still vastly important, it's just not as impactful as it used to be. So our relationship now is more of like suite of services. So it's like if we're uploading a video, we'll put you on our TikTok or Instagram. Our TikTok actually is crushing it right now. And then we try to focus more on the record label side. So if we are going to promote an artist, we try to sign them and sign the master, and really try to work that through our entire network on the marketing side as well. Just because a YouTube upload now on Trap Nation isn't going to do what it did 6-7 years ago. So I think if artists are expecting the same results, they just have to cooperate a little bit more with some of the other opportunities that we offer.
Yeah. So that's one sort of central component, if you like, of your ecosystem. And then you've got Lowly, which was something more recent, right? So what is Lowly? How does it fit into this ecosystem, and why did you launch it?
Yeah, so we started Lowly as really the independent record label brand underneath the Nations. And the reason why we called it Lowly, for two reasons, really. The first reason was we didn't want to sign people to Trap Nation Records because I think there is this silo or this precedent set where it's like, oh, well, if you make anything other than trap music, you don't want to sign to a
Mm.
record label called Trap Nation. So, and we wanted to branch out into other genres. That was a huge thing for us. Like we had a full belief that like there was other genres that we could market into that would go outside of trap music that we would probably do quite well in as a team. So that was the kind of the first reason why we called it Lowly. And then the second reason was more or less like the whole premise of Trap Nation always was to promote underground artists. It wasn't to promote the top, artists in the world. It was to try and shine light on these kind of like lower tier artists, and that's based on the name Lowly, which is kind of like I would say low tier, but it's like in terms of the classism, it kind of represents that.
Yeah.
So that's why we named it and started it, and then the whole premise of it really was like to just continue building out a brand for the independent record label side of the Nations, because I think that's really for us. Like I never wanted to rely on income from a third party platform like YouTube, especially on the ad side, which could change any day, any time, which it has over time. And the company wouldn't survive if we never started the independent record label side. So that's kind of the premise of it, and that's I think we started at 6 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. And it's doing quite well.
And how does that work in terms of then beginning to work with artists? Do you actively scout for artists, sort of traditional A&R, or are you looking on looking for them to blow up on a platform and then bring them into Lowly and then cascade them through the ecosystem, or do they come to you? How does that work?
Yeah, so Lowly originally was just signing singles that we would upload to the channel, and then it became basically full blown artist development where we're going out and scouting artists that we really believed in and putting up large financial commitments and resources, team development, everything And it still is that. And then we've done that for the last 5 years, give or take. But it started off as a singles based label where we exploit just the single. We signed the publishing too, and then we'd move on and started doing artist development because that's where we thought there was more potential in. And then we still do artist development for that label now.
Okay, and then there's this sort of third section, if you like, broke. So, what is that? How is that different to the other to Nations and Lowly?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, Broke is actually our new label. We started last year, or really, we started up heavily working it back in like October of 2023. And the whole premise of Broke and why we started it and why it's different than Lily is we noticed there's a lot of music that goes viral in these underground internet genres that I think a majority of people in the music industry just do not understand. And for us, we always like to be kind of ahead of the curve or at least try new things. So we saw a lot of these other independent labels signing this music and doing really, really well. And the current team that we have and had at Lowly, I don't think are equipped to work in a space like this because it's so fast paced and it's so different. So we started a whole new label on the premise where it's like, okay, we're only going to really do small EP deals, singles deals, really, really quick deals where it's like, we'll throw up a little bit of advance and it's typically tracks that are actually already moving on social platforms. Maybe they're already out on Spotify. For us, it doesn't matter if it's out on Spotify or not, but we look for things that are trending on socials. And then essentially the whole team is built around marketing those songs. So, we have four full-time marketing people that essentially all they do all day and night is just find these singles, work them on TikTok and Instagram, and then hope for them to break on Spotify. And that label has been a resounding success since we started it. So we're very happy with the results.
And can you give us a sort of, you mentioned there that this is very fast moving. These are songs that are blowing up quickly. It's on the cutting edge of what people are listening to. Can you give us an example of what kind of genres of music that is? Where it's blowing up?
Yeah. I mean, the genres. I mean, for me, it's almost genre-less. It's these mix of like weird, electron. It can be anything really. Like we signed Hip Hop Jersey Club, weird electronic genres that really come and go. I think in terms of names, but a lot of it's like this weird experimental kind of like bass music or drum and bass. We have a really big Jersey Club artist signed to the artist called Brian, or signed to the label called Brian Stannon. He's been a huge focus for us. And then all of it really is based on TikTok. So for us, I'm a firm believer on a business kind of like philosophy standpoint. If we'd rather be elitely good at one thing or one platform where we can just own that and tell people, hey, we're the best at this specifically, rather than trying to be good at multiple things. So that's kind of been the premise of the label, where it's like just lean into what's working and then try to be the absolute best at it. Be the best marketing team in that ecosystem. Be the best A&R team in that ecosystem. And then as times change, we'll pivot. But currently that's what's been working the best right now for the company is just focusing on TikTok and Instagram and finding music that's working, and then market those trends and try to blow up records using social marketing.
What is your view on music consumption today in 2024 on this sort of cutting edge?
Right. Yeah. So for music consumption, I think it's definitely changed in the last. I mean, it's even changed in the last 2 years. But I mean, comparatively speaking to when I started, obviously the nations to now, I mean, music consumption has basically moved entirely from, I'd say, strong gatekeeper. I mean, we go through waves, right? So when YouTube broke and SoundCloud broke, there was this interesting pivot in the music industry where we created this gap between the major labels and then the indies. And that gap essentially was a kind of like democratization of how people discover music, because record labels didn't really take larger record labels like Warner, Sony Music, or Universal did not take YouTube serious as a music platform, because again, it was a video platform. It was created for video consumption, and now it's the largest music platform in the world in terms of consumption. But during that time when labels didn't understand it and didn't want to do deals with it and didn't want to put their artists on it, it created this large time gap for people like myself who actually understood what music consumption was becoming at that time when I was 15, 16, because that's where I consumed music. So we can create these brands and these outlets where we put on new artists. And what you saw from this giant gap of time where the major labels didn't pay attention to YouTube is a ton of new indie artists break out because you have a new discovery method, which is on this platform called YouTube, and you have these people just naturally finding music they like because an algorithm is feeding it based on user consumption behavior, right? So that's what happened during, I'd say, 2012 to like 2015. So you all saw all these new indie labels break out. People like myself build, $1 million businesses off just basically major labels denying the fact that this existed. And then, obviously over time they said, okay, this is obviously extremely important. We need to work within YouTube. And then there was this large gap where a lot of the music consumption was being fed by curators on platforms like Spotify, curators on platforms like YouTube and SoundCloud, and people that worked at these companies. And it became almost like just fed music fed to consumers by these people that curated the playlists. So for that time period, you didn't see that many new indies break. You didn't see a lot of new artists break. It was really kind of the same revolving cycle. And then now, when TikTok became a lot more relevant in the last 2 or 3 years, you see again a huge breakout of new indie labels, new indie artists. I mean, you have random indie labels out of countries that you've never heard of doing $10 million of gross revenue a year, and they didn't exist last year. And labels just do not. Traditional labels do not understand how this is working right now. So you have this weird kind of like wave that happens, and it happened every 8 years. I'm sure every 5 years. I'm sure we'll go into a time where the major labels keep up in the next few years. They start acquiring all these indie labels, and then it becomes another standpoint where they just own the TikTok market. But that'll obviously exhaust and turn into something else over time. So the music consumption field now and how people discover music is entirely based on algorithms on the platforms like Instagram and TikTok. And I think that's mutually beneficial, not just for the artists, but it's also mutually beneficial for the people consuming music because they're getting music that they actually want to hear based on their user behavior. And then artists can actually promote themselves without having to sign to labels and then breaking themselves. And then, they can go do deals with whoever they like and choose. But, the data, I think the data backs it up. If you look every single year for the last 15 years, independent music consumption has continually gone up compared to major label market share. Obviously, they still own the massive market share, but it is incrementally driving up, and I think that's an important kind of data fact that we can use to back the thesis that these new platforms coming up, especially on the social side, are extremely important for continually increasing market share for independent artists.
Right, that's really interesting because yes, you're right. The independent sector is big. There's lots and lots of players in it, and they can really drill into one niche and become successful there. How do you think that's going to play out? You mentioned this sort of secular this sort of there's the cycles that happen in the music industry of acquisition and then change. Do you think that is how it's going to happen? Because you could say that there's so many of these indie labels operating from so many places, and they really just drill into one niche. Will the bigger companies go in there and compete or buy them, or will they just let them?
I mean, they're already trying to. I mean, but I think a lot of these, I think again, they're too slow in the sense of like, and it's not their fault. So like larger entities that have, huge moving bodies of individuals, employees, etc., and business models, they are just not equipped to move fast. That's not their business model. Their business model is to stay put where they are and monetize the current model that they have and exploit that. And they do extraordinarily well at that, right? But there's always going to be these holes that they're not able to fill where there's opportunities for people like myself to take advantage of that because we understand how to move quick and build teams that are really good at what they do. I think they'll catch up. I think they'll come in and they'll start acquiring these companies or build JVs, which is already happening. There's many of these independent labels that are already under major owned distributors like the Orchard or ADA, or they're in JVs with companies like the Warner or Sony. But it's an interesting time, obviously, because Universal is not negotiating with really TikTok in terms of putting their catalog on there, which honestly is better for Sony and Warner as well as the independent labels because it opens up the algorithm to feed more independent music to people. And I mean, I feel like we've even seen it like in the last 3 months. The amount of music that we're signing and kind of like marketing has just been insane on platforms like TikTok.
So then we have this market, which is there's a lot of niching going on. People you mentioned earlier, like the resurgence of drum and bass, which has just sort of popped out of nowhere, and suddenly it's everywhere, having not lain dormant for a long time, but it's been there for the last 25 years, and then all of a sudden it's exploded to prominence. But it's in a kind of it's still a sort of niche way. It's a large niche. A lot of people interested in these different genres and different scenes, but they stay sort of in this deep niche, if you like, which is good for that ecosystem, I guess, and good for those fans. So, what is it that the audience really wants in terms of music and music delivery outside of the ecosystem you mentioned around like community? What is it they want in terms of how the music is being um, sort of delivered to them?
A large reason why drum and bass, and just on the consumption, why people are paying attention to it more or less now, is because tastemakers like Boiler Room and stuff like that, who are putting
Mm,
on these new artists on, again, a visual format. And I think when people see the genre being experienced on a live format with the energy that's there, people in a bunch of room, crammed, kind of dancing around, smiling, laughing, screaming, whatever that may be, and it looks like a really good time. I think it just makes the genre a lot more interesting. And I think a lot of these genres are supposed to be experienced live as well. So I
mm,
think in terms of like why people are paying attention to that genre now, or kind of like what the experience looks like and why they care. I think again, like platforms like TikTok and Instagram, which are like more or less visual leaning, are delivering algorithm fed content of people having a great time in some underground boiler room set in London to this drum and bass artist that you've never heard, and it's going viral, and all of a sudden you see it on your feed in Brooklyn, New York, or something like that. You're like, dude, this is sick. I've never even heard of this genre. I want to experience this. I think that's allowing people to experience and consume music in a new format that really didn't exist in the last like 4 or 5 years. On YouTube, it did, but not in a short form content way. YouTube's
mm,
long form. On TikTok, it's short form. You can see a 6 second feed of that crazy clip where it's the best maybe timestamp where everybody's dancing and bouncing around or something like that, and you just get really interested by that. So I think that's kind of like what's feeding a lot of the consumption right now. What people want is like they want to experience music where they feel like there's energy and there's something to like where you can go to and you're like, dude, I want to go to that show or I want to go do that. And you see that, I mean, most of the trending artists now, especially in dance, they blew it up. They blow up because they have their shows going viral on TikTok or they have their show clips going viral
mm,
on Instagram. And I think that's a huge kind of component to it now as well.
interesting. And so, you've got this situation again where you've got fans who want to be part of a community. They want to feel identity and they want to feel something which they can connect to, and that sort of impacts on the consumption and delivery of the music as well.
Yeah.
So, where are things going if we look ahead? Where do you see this music consumption space in perhaps 5 years' time? Because it feels like, in terms of delivery, the videos are probably not going to get shorter. Or I mean, maybe they will, but there's a limit to how short they can get, right? And
Yeah.
they're going to get better and more visually attractive or whatever. But where do you see it going in terms of consumption, in terms of what it looks like and what people want?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, people always. I mean, this is the magic question that if anybody could figure out,
Mm,
they'll be a billionaire in two
yeah.
years. I mean, I think for us, TikTok is here to stay for the next probably 2 3 years. I think music will continue to break on this platform. People will continue to sign records off that, and you'll see labels that understand that ecosystem to continue to grow. And same with music consumers. And I think TikTok knows this. They know the strengths of their platform. They know what's happening on their platform right now. And same with Instagram. A lot of artists are breaking in Instagram. I think it's interesting because if you look like let's just say like 5 years ago in dance music was way more refined and almost like mixed and mastered and built for like
Mm,
autoplay consumption. And if that's weird, like a radio consumption. Whereas now like dance music is very kind of grimy and less mixed, less mastered. People don't really want refined content anymore.
mm,
Raw content from your phone almost always does better than content from a camera now on social media, which is insane. And I think
mm,
that's just because people want to experience something that's more familiar or more similar to what they experience in real life. They don't want super edited content anymore. So I think actually we're going to peak in that aspect in the next probably 2 3 years, and we'll go back to really refined edited content,
mm,
more mixed and mastered music, where people don't want to hear the super grimy dubstep or super grimy dance music anymore. They might want to hear more refined, more happier music. But also, music always correlates with trends around the world as well. So obviously, there's war going on right now. There's a lot of conflict going on right now. So that's why I think music, especially in dance, is a little bit more grimy, a little more bass heavy. Whereas, 5-6 years ago, I think the times weren't as
Yeah.
crazy, right? So I think that correlates with it as well. But it's hard for me. I can't. I mean, look, if you asked me 4 years ago, where do you see music going? I'd probably say, oh, YouTube's going to be the biggest thing in the world still, and obviously that's changed.
Yeah. One final question then, with regards to TikTok. You mentioned earlier about this dispute right now between Universal Music Group and TikTok, and let's say hypothetically, there's a point where that music doesn't. Let's say Universal's music never goes back onto TikTok. I don't know. I've no idea how that will pan out. But let's say that doesn't happen.
Mhm.
Is that just a win-win for you? It just opens space for independent music. And do you think if that did happen, would users be fine? Would they sort of say, hey, okay, these famous artists aren't on here anymore, but there's all this great independent music, and that's good enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think Universal's not powerful alone to change TikTok's platform, and I think they know this. They saw it in the data. They didn't see. I don't think they saw really any drop off from user behavior, just from let alone Universal's music being removed from the platform. And yeah, I mean, as shallow as it sounds, I mean, I hope they never work out a deal because it's great for people like us, and I think it's great for consumers when they're being fed more independent music. And I think the only people it really hurts in this situation are the artists, especially the independent artists, or sorry, not independent, the smaller artists, developing artists on Universal Music that actually need platforms like TikTok and Instagram to break. Well, I wouldn't say need, but like it's a huge component to now as breaking as a developing artist. I think that's who it hurts the most. Yeet and Taylor Swift and Drake and all these guys, they're fine. I mean, they're massive top 40 artists. They don't need platforms like TikTok to continue their their growth as an artist. So selfishness, yes. I hope they never work out a deal, and I think it's mutually. I think it's better for the music industry as a whole, especially for the independent market share that the deal never gets worked out. I think they will eventually work it out, but I do think if Sony and Warner also pulled out, that would be maybe detrimental to TikTok as a platform because that's a huge market share of music that people want to hear, but. I don't think Universal alone, standalone alone, is impactful enough to make any change, really.
Okay. Well, I will link to all the various things we mentioned: Nations, Lowly, and Broke. And people, if they're not familiar with it, can check it out for themselves. One final question, then, Andre, which is: we've talked a lot about delivery of music, but let's talk about music itself. If you could only pick one piece of music to listen to forever, and narrow it down to that, what would it be?
Probably classical, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's the most versatile in terms of listening. Because any other genre, I couldn't listen to hip hop every single day or dance music. It would get too repetitive.
Right. Okay. I had you pegged for some sort of electronic music. I'll be
honest.
So there you go. Okay, great. Well, there we go. Then a nice overview of that whole ecosystem. And Andre, thanks for taking the time to explain it to us.
Of course. No, thanks for having me, Joe.
There we go. That's it. Thank you again to Andre. There are some links to the various components of his network below the podcast. And if you found that useful, please do share it on with someone else who you think will enjoy it. And if you want to get in touch with me, of course, I would love to hear from you. You can email me on joe@musically.com. If you'd like to stay in touch in a different way, we have a free weekly email called The Knowledge, which rounds up bits and pieces of the best analysis, news, marketing insight, and skills from across all of Music Ally's services. Sign up with the link in the description and, well, become a better person. That's it. Thank you for listening. I have been Joe Sparrow. You have been you. And until next time, farewell.